them and raise them as well. And when Kat came back from her visit to Nellie's Orphan Center, she said, she was all fired up. She said, I want to go back and help Nellie. I'm going to go back and work with Nellie. So now she stands before us ready to go back to work with the Nellies of South Africa and Sub-Saharan Africa to try to provide support and love for these motherless, parentless children. So let's hear her plan.
Week, and I just could not help but feel that it was meant to be, because I watched this documentary, it affects me so greatly, and then there's a chance to go. So at the time I was 18, I was working 2 jobs and I was living on my own, and I did not have extra time to be earning money to go to Africa. But I honestly felt a peace about it, and I just knew that it would happen because it just felt so right in my heart. So I signed up and I put down a deposit and was like, okay, I'm going. And it turned out to be a great thing. So arriving in Africa, the first thing that I saw was a billboard that read, "Today is a perfect day." It was not an advertisement, it was just simple and beautiful. And throughout my entire trip, I saw the people of Africa living according to this motto. To give you an example, I met a woman whose sister had been murdered a week prior to us meeting. And she was, cracking jokes. She was like hitting me on the shoulder and making jokes, and I was like, whoa, okay. And then she told me that, and I asked her, how can you be so happy when something so terrible just so recently happened? And she said something that in itself was beautiful. She said, "I'm alive today, why not celebrate?" And to me, that just describes Africa and the whole mentality there. And I long for that. I long for that type of mentality. So while I was there, just a quick overview, I was exposed to the work going on in the hospices. I met with healthcare providers. I worked in orphanages and packaged and delivered food and that type of thing. So the first orphanage that I went to was it was pretty cool. You see those commercials where the children are sad and these people are asking for money, and it's just not like seeing it firsthand. Like, I was sitting there, and just to describe it a little bit for you, the children are in tattered clothes, and you may have seen some of the pictures in the information center where these kids are sitting on the floor, a cold cement floor. They're eating their one meal for the day, which is pop, which is basically cornstarch, and it has no nutritional value. And I was pretty disheartened from it. I just felt sad, but then that didn't really last long because the kids were like so funny that I was laughing again in like 2 seconds, and I played this game with them. And they didn't speak English, and so I had to find a way to play with them without incorporating too much language. And so I had this big group of kids in front of me, and I was like going, "You," and then they'd all point at me, and they'd go, "You," and then I'd be like, "Me," and they'd all go, "Me," and then I'd go, "Tickle me," and they'd all go, "Tickle me," and then I'd run after them and grab them and tickle them, and they'd all scream and run away. And they were just so filled with happiness, and they have so little, and their circumstances are so hard. I mean, stuff that children should not be seeing or dealing with, and yet they cheered me up. So, sorry, 1 second. That story is really touching for me. So there was a little boy who was kind of away from the crowd a little bit, and he was kind of standing on his own. And so I went over to him, and I knelt down next to him, and I put my arms out, and he just fell into me, like full body weight, smiled, and he fell in, was like, phew, this kid, and I just held him for a minute and just was holding him, and he was just loving it, soaking it in. And then a line of kids formed behind him, and they all wanted a hug. And sorry. So I hugged everyone. One second.
We're trying to,
I have not shed a tear yet. These are just watering. I'm not going yet. Okay, so, okay, I'm recovered. So before I go on, I just want to tell you a little bit about what's going on in the government right now. So, moving on, I want to tell you about a very special person to me, and her name is Nellie, and Susan mentioned her. Nellie had an orphanage as well as a family of her own, and in her orphanage there was 32 children. And one thing that really, took me, I couldn't believe, was that there was no stove. And just for a second, imagine trying to feed 32 children day in and day out with no stove and hardly any money. Just the overwhelming aspects of it all. The building was falling apart, and literally the roof was down in parts, and there was water dripping onto the floor, and so they had to move the kids to another room to sleep, just tragic. Stuff that when something so good is happening and there's just not enough resources to make it happen fully functioning. But Nellie had such a heart for these kids that she would spend emotional time with them. She would smile as she worked. I mean, her kids had tragic circumstances, as most children in Africa do. She told me a little bit about a couple of them. One child was 10 months old, he was HIV positive, and he had been found in a toilet. And another child was 1.5 years old, and he was also HIV positive, and he was found in a dumpster. I mean, what's going on there is just, it's appalling, really. But, so Nellie, she ended up talking with me for quite a while, and as I traveled through stories with her, I was absolutely amazed. She has seen unspeakable things, and I won't go into detail about them, but some very horrible things, and they have not affected her heart in a negative way. She is one of the most strongest women, that was for you, Stephanie, I have ever met. And just the manual labor that she did in the orphanage alone was enough to tire me out for a week. And she was washing pots and joking and laughing with kids and smiling as she did it. And you just don't find people like that every day. So the more she told me, the more I was impressed with her. And one of the last things that she said to me was that she only had enough rand to feed either her own family or the children in the orphanage. And so she alternated nights of who got to eat. And she said to me something that changed my life. She said, "Every night I go to bed with children crying." And it broke my heart. So it was right then that I knew that I was coming back and I was doing something bigger. And there was nothing that anybody could do to stop me.